Formula One has three main aims for the future: financial stability, carbon neutrality, and creating great racing. A big part of achieving all three of these things is rule changes to tyres, more specifically the blankets that teams use to preheat them. This rule change has been in the works for years, but just a year away from its implementation, drivers are now saying that it will be dangerous and pointless. Want to know about the rule change that Lewis Hamilton is demanding be stopped? Then stick around for the rest of the video. Cold tyres are the enemy of the racing driver, so it's no surprise that teams go to great lengths to heat up the rubber to give the tyres grip as soon as they touch the asphalt. On track, this takes the form of drivers swerving all over the track, putting energy through the tyres in the form of friction and pressure, which then becomes heat energy, heating the rubber. Before that though, teams preheat their tyres using tyre blankets. These are the things you see mechanics peeling off tyres on the grid and in the pits before a pit stop. If you have an electric blanket at home, that's basically a tyre blanket, but much, much, much cheaper. The first attempt to heat Formula One tyres was recorded in 1974, during the Canadian Grand Prix, which took place in September. As is normal in Canada in the autumn, conditions outside were on the colder end of things. The early part of the weekend saw drivers struggle for grip, and there were concerns that on the race start, tyres might actually separate from their rims. Definitely not something you want ever happening, especially not when you're travelling at over 100 miles an hour. McLaren found a solution by converting their pit into a heated shed that would keep the tyres warm so they could withstand higher internal pressure. By the time the tyres made it to the grid though, they would have cooled down again. The answer was found in the team's hotel. Duvets and blankets were requisitioned from the beds, wrapped around the still hot tyres on the grid to keep them warm. Emerson Fittipaldi took the checkered flag that afternoon, having started on pole, and the concept of warming the tyres entered F1, even if it took a few more years for the technology to be perfected. I'm not going to deep dive into the science behind tyre temperature, pressure, and the effects it has on grip and handling, because you aren't here for that and I don't know enough about it to do it justice. All you need to know that hot tyres mean more grip, and higher pressure means a stiffer ride, both of which make a Formula One car faster. There is a point where more pressure is bad actually. See, it's more complicated than it's worth getting into. But you can understand why teams would want to use heated tyres. The problem is that heating tyres costs an incredible amount of money, when, in theory, the cars could survive without the heat and the racing would be better. Let's talk about the cost first. AlphaTauri boss Franz Tost gave us a figure for the cost of tyre blankets last year. 3 or 4 years ago, I was really pushing very hard that we get rid of these tyre blankets. 4 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, I approved the order for next year's new tyre blankets. €375,000. I ask myself, what for? For Formula One teams, that was spare change a few seasons ago, but with a cost cap in place and a goal of financial stability, that's now a lot of money. The cost doesn't end there though. Every team, 4 or 5 engineers working for this process. Then there's the sustainability. We need a lot of energy for running this process with the tyre heating. We couldn't find exact data on the tyre blanket energy usage, but there are 7 sets of 4 tyres per driver being heated at 70 degrees centigrade from 2 hours before every single session. That's 2,800 tyres being heated to 70 degrees every weekend. That's a lot when you think about it. And that has a big environmental impact as well, which isn't great when F1 is aiming for carbon neutrality. So what about the better racing I mentioned? Well, at the moment when a driver has a pit stop, they leave the pits on tyres that are pre-warmed. For the soft tyres, that means they're at peak performance pretty much as soon as they cross the pit exit. For harder tyres, it can take a few laps, and for the medium tyres, it's somewhere in between. If the tyres were cooler, therefore taking longer to reach peak performance, pit stops would be much more impactful, making the race strategy game more complex and with more space for outplay. So when you consider Formula One's 3 aims, financial stability, carbon neutrality, and better racing, getting rid of them is a no-brainer. But if this is true, then why are the drivers so against it? Tyres that are not preheated need to cope with dramatic swings in temperature and pressure, which is technically complicated, and drivers have voiced concern about the lack of grip that will be offered by tyres that are cold when fresh out of the pits. These are the problems that F1's tyre supplier Pirelli have to overcome. These are problems that have never been solved by any tyre maker, and Pirelli are literally having to work beyond what was previously thought possible with rubber. They've been working hard on trying to come up with the right products though, and hope that by the time it tests its latest specifications after the Silverstone race in early July, it can be enough to convince teams to agree with it. However, there remains deep skepticism within the paddock about whether or not the move should go ahead. Speaking during pre-season testing in Bahrain, Hamilton voiced his own worries about the move and suggested that there was no benefit to the change happening. "I think it's dangerous," he said, when asked about the tyre blanket situation. "I've tested the no blankets, and there's going to be an incident at some stage. So I think it is the wrong decision. You have to drive multiple laps to get the tyres to work. The whole argument is that taking away the blankets is going to be more sustainable and more green, but in actual fact, we just burn more fuel to get the temperature into the tyres. The more concern is when you go out, you're skating around and it's very twitchy. If someone else is on tyres that are working, you can easily collide with them, so it's a pointless exercise." That is a pretty good argument against the tyre blanket from Hamilton. Cars crashing is definitely not helpful for financial stability or carbon neutrality, but that is why Pirelli is continuing the development of their rubber. The tyres currently being used by cars across the grid are designed to be used with tyre blankets. The new tyres will be designed to be used without them. I wouldn't try to use my petrol Honda Civic without fuel, and I wouldn't try to fill up a Tesla with petrol. Hamilton's questions about the benefits of the ban have been echoed by Ferrari's Carlos Sainz. "I still don't understand why F1 are moving away from the blankets, because for me it makes no sense," he explained. "You're burning more fuel, more tyres. Even on sustainability, I just don't understand the philosophy. Also, there are risks with these lower ride height cars, but it is a direction that F1, the FIA and Pirelli have decided to take, so we need to adapt, I guess." Pirelli have responded to the drivers' concerns about the current tyres. Mario Azzola, the head of Pirelli, said that Hamilton tested the tyres in very cold temperatures, and that the rubber he used was not the finished product. "Lewis tested the tyres in Paul Ricard at the beginning of February," Azzola told the media. "It was quite cold in that period, and clearly we tested some tyres that are not the final version of the tyres that we want to homologate without blankets. The idea to remove blankets is something that we discussed years ago, and it is a common thought between the FIA, F1 teams, Pirelli and promoters to achieve carbon neutrality for 2030. By the sounds of Azzola's comments, and those of Franz Tost from earlier in the video, the teams are keen to get rid of the blankets, even if the drivers aren't. Drivers don't have to worry about the team's bottom line though, whereas the bosses do. Azzola went on to say that developing tyres that are usable without blankets is a big technical challenge. "I just want to say that it is a technical challenge, a big technical challenge," the Pirelli boss says. "We need time to develop the tyres. We have a plan, and we also have an agreement to analyse the data in July." He also acknowledged Hamilton's comments about using more fuel to heat up tyres, which is a fair argument for the next 2 years, but once the 100% sustainable fuel becomes mandatory in 2026, it's a dead argument. Once the post-Silverstone test has happened, Pirelli will have until the end of July to compile their data and present it to the teams, the FIA and Formula 1 management. A vote will happen no later than July 31st this year for the removal of blankets from 2024. If it doesn't get through this year though, don't expect this to go away. The FIA and the teams seem keen on this happening with or without the driver's blessing, be it next year or a season in the near future. Do you think the drivers' opinions should be taken into consideration with the tyre blanket ban? Or is the cost, both financially and environmentally, enough of a reason to get rid of them anyway? Let us know in the comments down below, and while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to get all the news as the new season begins. Until next time, drive safe and bye for now.